welcome to Too Much Information. Thank you so much, Justine. How you doing, man? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honour.
Yeah, well, more than welcome. I'm really grateful, really appreciative. Even though it's a fatherhood, well, not even though, because it's a fatherhood series, I did think, how am I going to incorporate the the female perspective on fatherhood? And I thought, out of all the people that I do know and that I'm friends with and that I'm friends with on Insta, Facebook, all of these things, your kind of story intrigues me, for one. And you as a person, you're very, I've always, even from school, I've just thought you was a very thoughtful person. That's, if I was to characterize you, I'd say you was a thoughtful person. So I've always thought that maybe you're somebody that has thought about their perspective on things, if that makes sense. Spend a lot of
Yeah.
time thinking about things. So those are the kind of people I like to talk to. And so yeah, once again, really appreciative. Thank you for doing it. And I'm
You're
just looking
welcome.
forward to it. All right.
Me too. Yep.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Stuff. All right. Okay. So let's start with your early years then. What was the setup and the makeup of your house growing up? Yeah, young, like
um,
from as early as you can remember, let's say.
from early as I can remember, it was from when my mum left. And that's because I've been told that I've created a block. So I don't really have any childhood memories of my mum being at home, through the trauma of, her walking out. So yeah, early childhood is dad and dad's family, and grandma being the big presence as well, the big female presence in my life. So and having siblings, obviously I've got 7 but there wasn't 7 at the time.
Okay.
I've got an older sister who shares a different father, and then I've got a younger sister and a younger brother by the same mum and dad.
Okay.
That was household, yeah, when I was really
Okay.
young.
So your mum left. But that was gonna
Mum
be
left,
that was
yeah.
where I was kind of gonna go. I was kind of gonna go like, all right. So how did? Because it's not the most usual setup, like dad being the prominent caregiver in the household. So
Yeah.
what do you know about your mum
I
leaving?
yeah, I mean, haven't really questioned dad about it.
Okay.
You overhear things and then you work things out yourself,
Mhm.
kind of, your own version of events, for want of
Yeah.
better words.
Yeah. Yeah.
As
Yeah.
you get older and you get to learn the two personalities of your parents,
Mhm.
you understand why it broke down.
Mhm.
But no holds barred. My mother is quite a selfish person,
Okay.
and it just wasn't a life for her anymore. Being this stay-at-home mum with all these children, 4 kids and whatever, it weren't for her. And since then, it hasn't been for her either. So,
Wow.
yeah, that was the breakdown. It was, yeah, she'd had enough, so she walked.
Jeez. And and what was there? Was there a level of contact in those years, or was it just a complete disappearance?
There
Or
was, so like going back, she actually came back, and then her and my father tried to work it out,
how old are you at this
and she
point?
decided. It wasn't too long after they split up. So when she first walked out, I was 7.
Okay.
My younger brother wasn't even potty trained yet.
Wow.
So she was gone for a little while. I can't remember exactly how long, but then she came back, and just to make sure, she really didn't want it anymore.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of those situations, So yeah, so it was
That's
difficult.
that's
It was
intense.
difficult because you're living with a broken man. My mother was the love of his life. So, you know, and he was geared up for a fight in terms of fighting for his children in court, etc. And the story goes that he turned up at court ready for this fight, and she said, "No, it's all right, you can have them. I'll have them every other weekend."
Wow.
Yeah, so
That's,
I think that was a bit tough.
yeah, that sounds proper intense. That sounds like
Mm.
that sounds hot, especially. So you were the oldest in the house, right?
No, at the time, my elder sister was the eldest. She shares the same mother as me, but not the same
Okay.
father. But obviously, she was there before I was even born when my dad got with my mum. So he taught her how to walk and etc. So there's 18 months between us. So when my mum initially walked out, she left my older sister behind.
Right.
So, you know, you predominantly got a black family, i.e. myself and my younger siblings are mixed race, dark hair, dark features, broad features, etc. And she's white, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Wow.
So, yeah. So she was with us too. So she was the eldest when it first happened.
Oh wow. So as you said that, so this is your so now you're a child that's almost, well, not almost, you're looking at as you said, a broken man that's kind of um lost, as you said, the love of his life. What did that look like?
Yeah. He hit it well. He hit it
Mm.
well at the time. You know, being so young, I didn't know I was looking at a broken man. You know, I
Right.
can have this conversation with you now because I've been through similar situations myself. You know, so I now know what hurt looks like and anger. And there was a lot of anger. That's predominantly what was in the household growing up.
Understandably, to be fair.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, when you are in that position, when you become a parent, when you're facing certain challenges in your adult life, you kind of look back and you can make sense of how things and why things were the way they were.
Mm. Fair. All right. So you didn't necessarily pinpoint the pain necessarily that your dad was experiencing at the time, obviously,
No,
because you were
no.
so young.
Hmm.
So what was your upbringing like? As obviously you said you had your grandma there as the kind of female influence
Yeah,
in your life, and um, like from all the pictures that I see, I can assume that she was pretty prominent in your life like that. But in the
yeah.
day to day of your house, it was your dad, I presume.
Yeah, definitely. Dad worked hard, really hard.
Hmm.
You know, 2, 3 jobs.
Okay.
You know, he was a bouncer. He
Hmm.
worked for Royal Mail. You know, he done everything that he could do to keep a roof over our head. There weren't really any luxuries or anything like that. It was like
Hmm.
hand to mouth, you know, kind of situation. I'm not saying, you know, we were in raggedy clothes or anything
No, I
like
hear you.
that, but you know, it was what it was, and we done what we had to do. And corned beef and rice is still on the menu in this family because you know
Yeah. Straight up.
that was our situation. So yeah, day to day, that was kind of looking after each other because Dad would get up and go to work early. So at the time, we lived in Tottenham on
Hmm.
Park Lane.
Okay.
So Dad kind of knew everybody down the street, in the shops, blah, blah, blah. He was a big presence, my dad. He was a big black man, but friendly giant, just don't cross him kind of thing. Everyone had a lot of respect for him.
Hmm.
You know, and he had a lot of support as well. So it was getting up, getting yourself ready, getting breakfast, you know, making sure you had what you needed. This was like primary school days,
Yeah.
and walking each other to school,
Hmm.
you know, and then walking each other back home from school, making
Yeah.
sure the front door was locked, you know, don't
Yeah.
answer the
Yeah.
door to no one, that
Hmm.
kind of situation, you know, just keeping
Hmm.
each other safe until Dad's come home. And as the years went by, he taught us how to be a little bit more responsible, you know, making ourselves dinner, etc. So yeah, it was a team effort really.
Yeah.
Nan was a big presence
Yeah.
because you know weekend work took Dad away, night times, bouncing on club doors, etc. So yeah, staying at Grandma's, who lived in Walthamstow, was a big part of our life.
Mm. That's yeah, that's amazing stuff. It's something that's not it's definitely not spoken about enough. Um, the the image of a good father, let alone
Mm.
I mean, a a black man that is able to, not even able, that does what he's meant to do, and in the best way that you can do. So, what do you think because even with, because I weren't raised with my dad either. Well, I weren't raised with my dad. You weren't raised with your mom. So,
Yeah.
but when my friends that have their dad around them, that I've been around as I've grown up, and I don't know whether you do the same thing. I do a lot of comparisons, and I do a lot of kind of
You
um,
analyze, you
yeah,
analyze. Yeah, of course. Like, you know the girls that, I'm friends with.
mhm,
And predominantly, a lot of them had both parents, growing
right,
up. And I spent time with them growing up. And obviously their rules and their amount of freedom, to
mhm,
express themselves, etc., was very different to us
okay.
growing up.
Also,
Dad was strict. Dad was strict, but looking back, reflecting on it, it was
mhm,
pure protection.
mhm.
He was trying to do the best he could with the tools that he'd been given,
And what did
and
this
he had
protection
to.
look like? What did this
This
protection look like?
protection, yeah, it was like, you better be at home by this time. It takes you so long to walk home from school, or so
Right.
long to get the bus come secondary school. So long to get the
Mhm,
bus home. This is the bus you should be getting. Blah blah. I'm going to ring the house phone, make sure that you're in at this time. If you're not,
mhm.
there's going to be repercussions. Like,
Yeah,
it was hardcore. It was
yeah.
hardcore. There were
Mhm,
chores. There was no one could come in the house. There was no playing out after school.
mhm.
There was none of that. There was none of that. And at the time, it felt like prison. I'm never gonna
Yeah.
lie.
No, I hear you.
It
That
felt.
was that
It
was
felt.
it's I think that is a single parent thing because my mum was the same way because there was
Mm,
that was the same thing. No one was allowed in my house. I wasn't allowed
mm,
to no one's house. Maybe when I got a little bit older and she met their
yeah.
parents, there was one person I could go to their house and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So like you say, it does. You do feel almost persecuted at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what have I done wrong to deserve this? Like, my friends are out, like, having a good
Yeah.
time. I got to suffer going to school the next day to hearing about they hanging out in the park and doing this and doing that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I weren't there. So yeah, it was harsh. It was harsh. I'm not even afraid or ashamed to say there were stages of hatred towards him for
I can
not
imagine.
allowing me to
Yeah.
have, what my friends had. So yeah, but like I said, you grow as a person, and
Mhm.
as a parent, and you realize that it was done out of love and protection. That's the
Mhm.
only way he knew how to control the situation and make sure that we were all okay. So
Mhm.
it is what it is.
It wasn't always rosy then as far as your receiving of this protection. So what did that was it something that you displayed? Was it something that you kind of
No,
um
no, 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 no. No, 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 no. Children should be seen and not heard.
yeah, yeah,
That was the
yeah.
main rule in the
Yeah,
household.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
you didn't voice your opinion or voice your concern about what you were losing out on, like that. Yeah, you didn't
Mhm.
play it like that
It
because
was one of them when he leaves the room and you're cussing to the wall like
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Not even out loud. Don't even mime the words. Like, just keep it in your head. Keep it
Yeah,
right here
I
because
hear
he can
you.
hear everything. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard to kind of try and understand, and it made me quite an angry person, um,
Mhm.
alongside not having a mum and
Mhm.
and all that. There was a lot of anger building up over the years, a lot of resentment,
Mhm.
a lot of why me.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it wasn't easy because men, I think they've got a lot better, but men are not emotional.
Mhm.
So there was no explanation or no reasoning to his actions at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm.
That was it. That was the law, you know. And
Mhm.
if the law was broken, there was going to be trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was no sitting down and explaining like I do with my kids now.
Mhm.
If I say no about something, which is quite rare, but if
Mm.
I say no about something and they get upset, I feel like I need to explain to them because I remember that feeling of
Mhm.
not having that explanation. So I made up my own scenarios in my head as to why I couldn't do or have something,
Yeah.
which weren't true at the
Yep.
time,
Yep.
and had someone have sat me down and said, look, I'm not doing it to be horrible. This is the situation,
Mm. Yeah.
work with me on this, but that's not how it was back in the day in the 90s and
Facts.
whatever. So, yeah.
Facts. 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 Yeah. That's so. All right. I'm trying to think. You. All right. So you have this feeling of almost resentment. You feel kind of like you said, why me?
Yeah.
How and you say even anger. So now there's anger's coming to the surface. Is this spilling out into like your just general life? Is this just something that you're kind of almost like it's all just internal stuff?
No, it did spill out. I mean, my girls will tell you now, they can't believe how I've turned it around. You know, I'm the
Hmm.
calm one of the group. They seem to have got angry as they've got older, and I've gone the opposite way. I
Yeah.
had a lot. I had so much anger. I wanted to fight the world. I was always
Hmm.
swinging. I'm not going to lie, you know.
Hmm.
And I always felt invincible as well, because I was being raised by such a tough man,
Hmm.
and experiencing such a harsh reality that
Yeah.
I didn't have any fear of anything else around me. You know,
Hmm.
nothing could be as bad as what I was going through at that time, you know, in my
Hmm.
life. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, I really didn't care what was going on. You know, if you looked at me the wrong way, then I'm going to ask you why. And if it wasn't good enough in regards to your reasoning, then I was swinging because you
Hmm.
were disrespecting me.
Hmm.
It was that kind of unnecessary anger, you know,
Yeah.
towards other people. It didn't spill out into my education, had a lot of
Hmm.
respect
Hmm.
for my elders, etc. But yeah, people on my level, yeah. And my anger as well in regards to protecting my siblings, you know.
Hmm.
I was probably having more altercations with people over protecting my siblings than anything else in my life.
Hmm. So how is your dad viewing those situations?
He was, in terms of my protection of my siblings,
For one.
he was proud. He
Yeah.
was proud. My dad was a
Yeah.
fighter. I'm not going to lie. You know, there was
Yeah.
no sitting down and saying, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. I wasn't a bully. I never went looking for it.
Hmm.
It was always kind of a build up to things. So, you know, it wasn't a case of I'd bump into someone and be like, oh, why are you looking at me? There was
A
background to that
reason. There was a
situation.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, there was background to that situation. And, you know, and like anybody in life, I suppose, enough is enough, you know, but my
Hmm.
enough is enough was a little bit short lived. You know, I could have
Hmm.
had a little bit more patience than what I did.
Hmm.
But yeah, my dad, I had one fight in school, and they had to lock me in Mr. Salisbury's office, um, and they called my dad. That's the only time I kind of got found out about
Yeah.
something like that. And
Yeah.
I wasn't in a good place. I
You
didn't
say
even
your
know what was going to
head's gone.
happen. I didn't. Well, my head was more gone than my head was gone with the altercation. And that's altercation. I had a fight in the corridor. You know,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
hair everywhere. People got involved. Blah blah.
Yeah.
You know, looking
Hmm.
back. Yeah, my head was gone with that. But being taken to the office and being told that my dad was on his way,
The
yeah, I was
fear.
crapping it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I didn't know how he was gonna respond to this situation. You
Hmm.
know, I'd never been in that situation before, so
Yeah.
yeah, I was very fearful. But his attitude was, "Did you win?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Good girl, let's go." You know, that was it. He was like,
Yeah.
he didn't really mind. You know, as long as you didn't lose,
Yeah.
as long as it was a worthy cause, as long as you was defending yourself,
Hmm.
that's it. You know, it was a proud father moment. But my dad was a fighter himself, so
Hmm. Okay.
runs in the
So
blood.
yeah. So how do you think? How do you think that type of parenting has impacted you now as a person and then as a parent yourself?
um, as a person, I'd say in my younger years,
Mm.
as a person, it made me feel invincible, because if my dad supported my cause, then it was okay,
Hmm.
you know. And as far as I was concerned, everything he said was gospel. So I saw no issue with my anger, with my response to situations that I weren't happy with,
Hmm.
etc. But you know, being the person I am today, no,
Hmm.
violence is the last thing on my mind. You know,
Hmm.
I am that kind of I walk away person. As a parent, I am very much about self-defense,
Hmm.
and very much against, you know, bullying, starting anything, which my boys know, and
Hmm.
they've never done anything like that.
Hmm.
They do have, again, it must be genetic, they do have short tempers.
Hmm.
And when they go, you know, it's very hard to bring them back. I talk to my kids about it more, you know, when they lose their temper. It never really got spoken about with my dad. So I do speak to them, and I want to know the underlying reason as to why they went that far, etc. It's always in self-defense. It is a little bit scary that I'm kind of seeing myself in them. But I relate to it. So I can't be that parent that says, well, you've got to stop this. You can't be like this. Because if it's within you, you know, you can't control it, especially at that age. There's no control in that, you know. And I think it's just best to kind of talk to them, talk through it, you know, and see if they have any regrets. And 9 times out of 10, they do. You know, they didn't mean to hurt the person that bad, but, you know, they just lost their temper and they pushed them too far. And, you know, getting them to talk about it and seeing if they, you know, there was an opportunity for them to walk away from the situation and just things like that. I do differently in comparison to my dad.
Interesting.
Back in the day when we only had 5 channels, I suppose.
Yeah, fair play. Fair. So, all right. So your household was more like entertainment wise, sport wise. It was like football. It was action
Boxing.
films, boxing. So that was kind of the environment that you were raised in.
Yeah.
Which I would have, which was definitely. I can really only use my household as a comparison because I was raised by a woman. It's like completely different, like the opposite. It's not saying she wasn't really on the romantic movies and all that, but definitely not. Boxing was something I had to try and squeeze in and watch somewhere, or I'll go to my uncle's house or something, and he was a boxing fan, so I could go watch it there. But so I'm just trying to gauge like the difference in like a completely male-dominated house.
There was no emotion. There was no faffing about. There was no you fall over and cut yourself and panic. There was none of that. There was the old school Dettol and a piece of tissue and slapped on there, and you know it was hardcore. It was hardcore. We were tough little kids, you know, and it affected me when I think about year 9. Because I was always a tomboy. I played football. You know, Daddy used to run the team at primary school. You know, I got on so well with boys. My best friend was a boy in primary school. You know, I hung out with the boys in secondary until year 9 when they started getting a little bit close to girls, and I couldn't relate. You know, that was their interest now, and so I had to kind of move over to the girls. And then when I moved over to the girls group, it was all about makeup and hair and, you know, who had the highest high heels, and they were wearing skirts while I only wore trousers. And, you know, it was a new world for me because I'd never had that. Even though I'd seen my mum, you know, when she could be bothered every other weekend growing up, there was no relationship there. She was a kind of parent that just throw you a bit of money and let you go out on your bike and do what you got to do all weekend and just come back and eat, you know. So there was a lot of freedom over there with my mum in comparison to my dad. There was no real attachment, you know, even going through, you know, becoming a girl. That was all my dad. My dad dealt with all that. My mum never got involved. No, that was all in my dad's hands, you know. So there was nothing that came from my mum. So that was really tough because, again, it wasn't explained to me, and it was just kind of.
How as a man would you explain that?
Yeah, I think men do now. I think men are quite open about it now.
But I think the internet exists now, so I think it's probably you could go into your bedroom and kind of do a quick Google search and kind of get the information that you need to. I feel like back then, how would you?
It was on the parents. It was on the parents. It was on the mum predominantly to explain to the daughter, you know, what was going on with her body changes, etc. And that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case with me. My dad just kind of, I do remember this situation. I don't know how deep you want me to go.
You can, as deep as you're willing to go. It's something
I
that
mean,
interests me just because I always
I'm
think like,
open. I
would I
mean,
be able to have that or would I'd have to have that conversation, but how would I navigate that conversation?
yeah, I mean, there was no navigation. It was, I found myself in the bathroom one day, and obviously it had started for me,
Yeah,
and no one had even explained that
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 this
was going
is
to happen to
gonna
me.
happen. Wow.
Yeah, so I thought I was dying,
Oh, you
and
must have.
yeah, and I'm calling out for my dad, and he's like, what, and when he realizes, he's like, stay there, and he literally goes to the corner shop and comes back with these huge things that I'd never seen before in my life.
Oh my god.
I could only liken them to nappies,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, what on earth is this? And, he explained to me very briefly what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that. That was my talk. That was my beginning. So I used to walk about with this huge, uncomfortable nappy
Oh
for
my
a long
goodness.
time until I kind of got in with the girls and realized there were alternatives to,
Mm-hmm.
what I've been using and whatever. So yeah, it was hard. I'd say I've had quite a lot of harsh lessons.
Harsh. That definitely sounds like a harsh lesson to
Yeah.
to learn. And as I say, I definitely um identify in that regard. Not in directly.
No, but yeah.
But you know what I mean. Um,
Yeah.
so what other things? Because that was actually on my thing to say as well. What things do you think um were missing? So what things do you think you would have got if your mum was actually active in your life
I
in the
would have
way
been
that
more
you think?
girly. I would have been, I mean,
What do you mean?
I
What's
say
good?
that,
Yeah,
but
don't say girly.
I remember being quite a tomboy from a young age. I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely adored my dad,
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say I should have been his firstborn son because we were that close. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got photos, he used to take me football with him, and
Yeah.
I'd be in the changing room with
Mm-hmm.
all the men, and then he'd stand me on the line, and I'd watch the whole match, and
Yeah.
I absolutely adored him.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to be like him. I wanted to do everything that he could do. So yeah, I was quite tomboyish because of my love for my dad, I think. But had I had my mum around, I would have known, maybe not chosen
Mm-hmm.
to take up those wants, i.e., doing your hair, your makeup, blah blah.
Mm.
But I would have known about them, and I
Okay.
didn't.
So was that a issue that came later on in life?
Yeah,
Kind of not
because when
having
it
that
came to
experimental time, maybe.
yeah, because when it came to, making friends that were girls, they'd had their mums around them. They'd been like this for a long time. They would walk into a shop and they wanted to look at the nice dresses, and I wanted to look at the Nike tracksuit and
Mhm.
trainers.
Mhm.
I couldn't relate to them. And thankfully, I fell into a group of girls that just accepted me for who I was. And the awkwardness eventually just faded away. I felt alienated from females because I didn't
Mhm.
understand it. I hadn't
Mhm.
experienced it. Even though my grandmother had been a huge and still is a huge part of my life,
Mhm.
it wasn't about that.
Yeah.
It wasn't about that.
Mhm.
Um, it was about going to church and being a good girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, it was hard, and it really affected me. I missed out on a lot. I missed out
Mm.
a lot. And I didn't feel like I belonged for a long time because I couldn't hang out with the boys no more because they were interested in girls
Yeah.
and I wasn't a boy,
Yeah.
and then I'm
Yeah.
hanging out with the girls and I'm not interested in anything they're talking about.
Yeah.
So it was just me kind of just, yeah, trying to figure things out.
So you're getting older, you're kind of finding your place almost.
Hmm.
So let's move into like obviously when you was younger, the boys are starting to maybe pay you a bit of mind, pay you a bit of interest, and you kind of like, what is going on here? You and my mate a minute ago, what's happened now?
Yeah.
So when did that change? When have you now started moving into kind of, all right, now it's dating season, now it's kind of that stage of your life?
Um,
What was that transition there like? And how did your dad kind of how
Deal
did
with
he
that.
deal with that?
I would say 16, was when I really got interested in boys.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't when I noticed boys were interested in me, etc. But yeah, 16 is when I had my first solid boyfriend. And to be honest with you, I was going through a really tough time with my dad. I was rebelling, and I actually moved in with my boyfriend at 16.
Okay.
Yeah, to his parents. Well, he was living with his mum at the time. Yeah, I rebelled really bad because home life was still so strict, and I was 16 now, man. I should be able to have this freedom. Like, I proved myself, you know. I've been a good girl. Like, why are you being so harsh on me still, you know? And I felt like I just needed to live my life. I was in denial about life.
Yeah. As we all are. As we all are at 16.
Yeah. Threw myself out there thinking I'm the big I am, and got slapped down, you know, and came running back home to daddy eventually, but no regrets. I needed it. It was another life lesson that I needed.
Facts.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've kind of, that's your first experience of a relationship now. So how did he deal with that? Was that something that there was ever a conversation about? Was that something, or there was an energy? Was he some type? Did you feel some type? Could you feel that he felt some type of way about it, or was it just kind of acceptance of the situation?
There was no talk. There was no sit down talk about boys, etc. He knew that I knew about the birds and bees, blah blah. You know, by that time. He would have jokes, you know, if I brought a boy to the house, because I wouldn't hide a boyfriend, you know. He would have jokes. He was a big guy. I don't know if you remember how big he used to be, you know, and he would just kind of put his stature there and, you know, give them the look and make them feel awkward, and, you know, I'd be there like, oh, Dad, stop it. Oh, no, who are you? You know, that kind of situation, you know, but nothing mean. No one ever felt threatened. I feel like I probably got treated a lot better because of my dad. And his presence
makes a lot of sense.
Because of his presence around the people that are brought to him. I think they had a lot more respect and fear, you know, to kind of not mess around with me as well. But yeah, he was cool. He was cool about it. He weren't too bad with that, actually, thinking about it. It wasn't terrible, but he couldn't really say much. I mean, look how many women and children and, you know, pot kettle black, hello.
Okay, all right.